well to get to this point, and does it kind of pain you some to see them in here for a third year?
Well, I think you got to respect the program that they're building, and I think that's from the top down, and it's the culture and everything that goes with it. And I think also, say it's pretty impressive from what Jake Fromm has done. I know he's got a lot of criticism lately, but first quarterback, I think, since Danny Werfel to have done it 3 straight years. So I think he deserves a lot of credit for that. And they've also made a statement in this game 2 years ago against Auburn. Last year, if Tua doesn't get hurt, they probably win that game walking away. And so they've made a big statement, and I think tomorrow they have a chance to make another one.
Tim, you played on a lot of big stages in your career. You played in this game a couple of times. How do you rate this one compared to any of the stages you've been on anywhere?
Yeah, this is a big one. It's just different. I think it's different. For us, we knew it was going to be our toughest game. Out of the 3 years I played in it, we really believed 2 of those years for sure it was the national championship. It was what we marked down at the beginning of the year every year as the biggest game, as our biggest goal. And sometimes people don't really get that or understand that, but for us it was, if we win the SEC, the rest will take care of itself. It's always been a hard game. There's a lot of pressure. It's a different environment than most of I think Georgia's a little bit used to it because the Florida-Georgia game is split 50-50. I think Georgia's probably used to having more fans in this game than other teams. I think LSU is going to show up pretty well, though, so it's going to be interesting to see how what happens with fanfare. But it's a different environment, and I think this is a big one of just kind of, all right, settling down, breathing, getting into the game, realizing that it's still the same game we've been playing all year, even though sometimes the nerves can get to you, and that is real in this game.
Tim, can Joe Burrow lose the Heisman tomorrow?
I think it's going to take a tough performance out of him, and I just don't know who I just don't think Chase Young would have to have a huge game. Jalen Hurts would have to have an amazing game. Justin Fields, I think, is just a little bit too far behind. I think Joe's just done so much this year that I think he would have to really lose it for his team, and someone else would have to have some huge Heisman moments. But I think it's Joe's by far.
Even if he has a bad game, LSU wins, you still think it's his?
I'm trying to think. It all depends on who really steps up and who's that number 2 person. You would look at it for going into last week, and you'd probably say Chase Young because of the way he's been able to dominate. But then not being able to really come up with any big plays last week in a big-time televised game, I think that hurt his Heisman chances. So I think Justin Fields has a chance. Some people would talk J.K. Dobbins, Jalen Hurts. I think Jalen would have a shot if he played really well, but I don't know if all the voters would respect Baylor's defense enough to give him the edge over that. I think Joe's body of work against really good teams over and over again, and just not making mistakes, and then in crucial moments coming up big, Texas, Auburn, Alabama, just every single time he's come up big. I think he's by far the leader.
If Georgia's going to win tomorrow, they have to play better offensively than they played all season long. How much of that is really a possibility? And if so, what will they do to kind of outpace their previous performances this season?
Well, I think they need to play complementary football. It can't just be this offense, we need more points. No, I think it has to be a team football game. You have to play complementary football. I think the offense has to support the defense, meaning you can't just, they get a stop, put them right back on the field. You need to get at least 2 first downs, control the clock, keep Joe Burrow off of the field. I think the average possessions in an SEC game this year are like 12.3 in a game. So if you're Georgia, you're saying, all right, is there a way we could limit LSU to 10 possessions? And then if we can take one away at the end of the first half, we'll limit it to 9. Then we can get 2 turnovers. We'll probably limit it to 7. All right, those 7 possessions, can we hold them to 3 touchdowns and a field goal? And, I think that's the way you process a game and break it down and say, okay, if, they have, 24, is there a way we can beat them to 27? I think that's where you look at complementary football and everything coming into play, and I think what's also going to need is the receivers got to step up for Jake and for this Georgia offense. Jake has to play well. You got to get DeAndre Swift going, but you need receivers. Your top 2 will be out for at least the first half. and your number 3 receiver has been DeAndre Swift. So I think that's going to really help to give them balance. And then you got to win. You got to win the. By far, you got to win the turnover battle and the kicking game.
As a quarterback, how would you handle that situation, receiver? As you mentioned, no Cage or no Pickens for the first half. What would you do in that spot if you weren't quite sure maybe what you had on the receiving end?
Well, I try to manage it with game plan. I would try to take my time. I wouldn't be up tempo. I would try to get DeAndre Swift involved. I would try to create mismatches for what my guys do well. Roberts is fast, and so I try to get him in speed, some crossing routes. I would try to be able to get some of my other backs involved as well, because they got a lot of speed and athleticism, and so I would really try to game plan it well.
Tim, you look at this LSU defense, a lot of guys that have a lot of talent, even guys going to the NFL, but it just doesn't seem like it's merging together. What do you think is the problem? What has kind of been that problem? How do they?
Well, I think they played well in the first half early in games, and I think they've kind of taken a little bit of a sigh going in the second half when they've gotten some leads, and I just don't think you can do that in this game or in the playoff. And they do have a lot of good talent, but I think you also have to piece it together. And I think they're playing their best football, and I think they played their best defensive game against A&M, so it's a good time to kind of start doing that.
If Georgia gets down early, do you think this offense is capable of coming back?
Coming back's not just about offense. I think it's also defense, it's special teams. It's all that coming together. If you get down, then you have to get multiple stops in a row too. So I think obviously they haven't shown that a lot this year. That they were a consistently explosive offense, but they do have the weapons to do it, and we've seen it, Jake, do it at times too. So.
Tim, you've been on record with your relationship with Jake. How do you think he's played this season? He's come under a lot of scrutiny.
Yes, I think it's probably hasn't been the season he hoped for. I think that he's still doing some things really well. He doesn't hurt his team. He's a great leader for his team. He doesn't miss a lot of open receivers. I think when you go back and you look at the film, when a team plays man-to-man, they're not winning a lot of one-on-ones like these other teams are. And then, I'd also say I don't necessarily know that they've schemed up to be able to set their guys up as well as Alabama or LSU with some of the calls as well. So I think all that plays into it. I love their approach against Florida in Jacksonville. I thought that James Coley had some really good third down game plan plays where they got people open, and Jake was able to hit them and be very efficient and effective in that game. I think they would have to play this game very similar to that.
Tim, if Georgia doesn't make the playoff and the offense doesn't look like it took it to another level tomorrow, do you think they need to reevaluate the way that they approach things offensively?
I think you always need to be constantly evaluating, and I think that Georgia wants to play a certain style of football, and I think that's good for Georgia. I think it's good for their personnel. I think it's good because there aren't many teams in the SEC that are playing that style of football. Everyone's now getting with the hurry up and the spread, and so I think when you can change it up, it's different, and teams aren't used to it. And so they're kind of like the odd man a little bit right now. I think that's helpful. But I think there's times when you have to be able to be efficient and effective in a drop-back passing game that I think that constantly needs to be looked at.
What could Georgia do within the framework of this offense to be maybe more creative in what they're doing right now?
Well, it was just mentioned a little bit in the Florida game. I thought they had a really good game plan against Florida, especially on third down. They did a lot of really good calls, anticipated what Grantham was doing, and be able to find mismatches or holes in the zones. And I think that be able to have an approach like that and be that efficient on third down, it will be as big of a key as it is in this game.
Last question.
Work is good without Joe Burrow. You feel like there's some specific things he does with this offense?
Well, I think this offense. I think I want to give Joe Brady a lot of credit. This offense a lot of credit. It's hard to stop, but also Joe Burrow makes it go too. So I would say it's both. No, you can't just plug and play another guy and think that you're going to have the same efficiency or or be as effective. I think that Joe Burrow has been by far the best player in the country this year. I think he's handled it with poise. But I also think that they've done a great job of coaching him and putting them in a position to succeed.
Thanks so much, guys. David Pollack mentioned in his interview that Jake Fromm his mechanics were a little bit off, and it sounds like he's had trouble with that throughout the whole season. Is it easy to get that back? Or is
what did he mention about his mechanics?
He was fading back and throwing off his back heel, things of that nature.
I think he hasn't been probably what he wanted to be in some of the games, but I think he's also been pretty good most of this year. I think he needs a little bit more support around him, and probably there were some throws that he would want back, but I think he's also done a really good job, and he's gotten his team to the SEC championship game. So, I think he's still one of the better players in the SEC.